Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. There continues to be a real lack of headlines coming out of Hollywood this week, so today I've decided to make this an all-viewer question episode. Now usually with those I pick 3 questions, but today I've picked 4 because 2 of them I think actually really go together, so I'm going to answer them in tandem as the last viewer question of this episode. Also, before we start, I want to say to Roz Garby, Roz has been extremely patient with trying to get me to answer his question about my thoughts on the film adaptation of The Last of Us video game. And Roz, I promised you, because your birthday is coming up on Sunday, that I would answer it this week. But I just want you to know it's going to be answered tomorrow because I still need to do some more research on it to make sure that I can fully address it because I'm not at all familiar with that video game. All right, but I have picked, I think, 4 really great questions for today. All right, the first one comes from A Magic Production. And A Magic Production says, "Hi Grace, love your channel, thank you. I have a question. Do you think Disney animation is going into another Renaissance age, or do you think it could plummet back into the dark ages of the Black Cauldron and the Great Mouse Detective again? Also, do you think musicals will play a big part in their success if they do come into another Renaissance age? Thanks and keep doing an amazing job." I really appreciate the vote of confidence in Magic Production. It means a lot. As to your question, I think it's a really great one, which is why I picked it, and I think it's really relevant to a lot of people these days because Frozen was such a phenomenal success and really seems to have put Disney back on top, a place it hasn't been for quite some time. And I think many people wondered if it ever would get back up there because the competition has raised its game to such a degree. So let's put a little perspective on this. You said that it was the Dark Ages with the Black Cauldron and the Great Mouse Detective. And I think that indisputably you're correct when it comes to commercialism. Those films weren't particularly successful at the box office, didn't sell a lot of merchandise, didn't really create a large fan base with the masses, which is what, for a film to be really successful, it needs to do for a company's bottom line. However, I would, in the defense of those films, and I'm sure a Magic Production feels the same way or understands this, they're still very good films, actually. And I think they go in the category of the smaller films that Disney has made during this kind of, period, this pause in between Walt's death and the Disney Renaissance ushered in by Jeffrey Katzenberg and Howard Ashman, which I'll get to in a moment. But there was some good work that was done there. The Jungle Book, Sword in the Stone, Black Cauldron, The Great Mouse Detective. And I think these films live on DVD and also this new streaming service. I think that's one of the good things about the streaming service that Disney has introduced. They have such a diverse array of their films that are available. It's not just the hits, that it's going to, when people are looking for something new to watch, they'll see how nice and charming these films are. That's how I would describe them. They're charming. I think they really speak to a certain period of animation where it was kind of finding its way. And I think these films maybe to some degree were necessary to get to the more sophisticated animation you see today. Not necessarily all the time from Disney, Disney animation, but you see coming from Pixar and such. I think that these films, they really worked hard to try and be something special. So I have fond memories of them because I would watch them as a kid many times under the covers, before going to sleep or on summer vacation, and I really feel very nicely about them. They have a very high nostalgia factor. So I'm sure others of you agree, and if you haven't seen these films, I really do suggest you check them out. Keep your expectations low, but they're kind of like The Secret of Nim and, Don Bluth's films that he made from that period. Again, any really big animation fan is familiar with all these films. And Oliver and Company, another great movie. They're really great, and you can see animation changing and growing. But anyway, yes, after Walt Disney died, the company kind of lost its way. And for those, forgive me if I'm sure Disney files know this, but I just want to put some, as I said, perspective here. But Walt Disney was a pretty old-fashioned guy, and he had his son-in-law, Ron Miller, who married his daughter Diane, take over the running of the company. And unfortunately, I'm sure Ron Miller was a very nice guy, but he unfortunately just was no Walt Disney. He was no, as we've come to see, Jeffrey Katzenberg or Howard Ashman. He just didn't have an affinity for the task at hand. And that was it didn't destroy the company, but it wasn't a great time. And so Michael Eisner was brought on eventually, I believe over from Paramount, I'm not sure, he came from another studio. He really wanted the job, he was very aggressive about it, and he got it. And I think that, I think Michael Eisner, for instance, Animal Kingdom was his idea. I think that's still trying to find its footing. And, Michael Eisner tried to be the new Walt Disney, introducing the world of Disney, etc., trying to put himself as the face of the company. And while that didn't work, he did some good, and he did, start the company on the path to where it is today, and that's really commendable. But one of the greatest things he did was hire Jeffrey Katzenberg, and of course this would be a very long discussion to tell you this whole story. So in short, I'll tell you to go watch Waking Sleeping Beauty. It is a phenomenal documentary about the beginning of the first Disney Renaissance with The Little Mermaid, and Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, all those films, and how Jeffrey Katzenberg and Howard Ashman are really responsible for that, and how they kind of, as the documentary says, woke up Disney animation. It's really well done. It's interesting to see the dynamics that Jeffrey Katzenberg, despite doing a lot of good, wasn't getting along with the animators, and he eventually left Disney on very bad terms, as we've discussed before, and went to found DreamWorks Animation. He's a very talented individual. He might rub people the wrong way, but I think you can't deny that he knows what he's doing. And he's the one who brought in Howard Ashman and Alan Menken off of Little Shop of Horrors. So, I mean, he really understands talent, and he had Chris Sanders come over to DreamWorks after Chris Sanders left Disney on bad terms. So, very interesting to see all this behind-the-scenes stuff. So anyway, yes, the films did very well, and then unfortunately when Howard Ashman passed away, because he wasn't just a songwriter, he was a big story guy, and he was able to help the songs move the story along, which was one of my complaints about Frozen, by the way, but he was really integral to the success of Disney and that Renaissance. But then, unfortunately, he died of AIDS, quite tragically. And they had a couple more hits after that, Lion King most notably, Elton John, Tim Rice, that worked out very well for them. But then, slowly it faded away, and they had another period where I think they were under a lot of threat from computer animation, and they really couldn't grasp that, and they had some misfires. And then today, of course, things got back on track with Tangled, Wreck-It Ralph, and now Frozen. Now, is this the beginning of a new Disney Renaissance? I say no. And it's not because I didn't like Frozen, by the way. I'm trying to be really diplomatic and even-handed and fair about this, so please allow me to explain. I think that Frozen was an accident. As you know, that film was being played around with till the very last minute. Jonathan Groff, for instance, has admitted he came in to record the voiceover for Kristoff many, many times because they changed the character so much. That's never done in animation, very rarely. Multiple times, and to the point where, because it's a personality change in the character, that's very big. That does not usually, I think, rarely happens. So you see a film that was being tweaked and played around with, really done by the seat of their pants, and it worked out. And I think a lot of that credit goes to Let It Go, a phenomenal song. Even I enjoy it. Even I have to admit, even though I have some problems with the lyrics, that it's a powerhouse performance by Idina Menzel, and I think the animation on it's very compelling. And you just also can't deny how it's touched a lot of people and means a lot to them. But I would also say that Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez perhaps weren't involved with the story as much as they should have been. I mean, it was they said that they originally wrote this as a villain song, Let It Go, and Disney Animation, hearing it, decided, and rightly so, guessed that people would relate to it if it was an anti-hero song. So they changed Elsa from a villain to a tragic hero, misunderstood. Very late in the game, by the way, and I think that's one of the reasons you have story problems. But that also shows a disjoint. That the Lopez's are writing songs over here, and Jennifer Lee and her co-writer, director are creating a different story over here, when they all should have been kind of together. Which I think that's why the Disney Renaissance worked. So in short, I don't feel that the structure, the infrastructure is in place to make another Frozen. I think they happened upon it. Also, look, the films they have coming up, I'm going to be making a movie about this hopefully next week. The films they have coming down the pipeline, I think, aren't going to capitalize on why people liked Frozen so much. They're not big musicals. They have something I believe called Zootopia, about it's Richard Scarry-esque with animals that have a community, like a fox versus bunnies. They have this Moana, Polynesian princess, but that's not until 2018. So basically, I think this success caught Disney unawares. They'll try and probably, I would bet, shoehorn Frozen 2 in there somewhere. But still, I think that they weren't expecting this. They aren't building anything. I think they're still taking shots into the dark. And good for them, they hit a bullseye. But I don't think I don't know if they can repeat it, is what I'm saying. I don't think they even understand their own success. So we'll see. But I'm of course rooting for them. I'm a huge Disney fan, and so I hope that they can. I hope they're dissecting this as we speak, and I'm sure they are, to try and see if they can reconstruct it. As for whether or not music will be a big part of it, I think for sure. I think that music is what drives these animated movies. I think it's what keeps people coming back. I think songs, we just talked about last year when Frozen was coming out, I did a video about Disney princess songs. People feel very passionate about this. And I think music is a big factor in the success of Disney. I mean, look at the Sherman Brothers, how much they contributed to the Disney empire. So thank you for your question, Magic Production. Let's move on to the next one. This is from Aiden Hepworth. And Aiden says, question. I've just seen a cover of Entertainment Weekly's new issue promoting X-Men Days of Future Past. And the center of the cover, in front of Wolverine and Magneto, is Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique. I would definitely class her as the biggest movie star, male or female, of the current time, juggling 2 huge franchises and obviously her Oscar win. Do you agree with me, and do you believe we are entering a stage where the females are just as big a draw to a movie as the men? P.S. I adore your channel. Smiley face. Oh, thank you, Aiden. That's so nice of you. Great question. Okay, Jennifer Lawrence, I agree with you. Definitely a movie star right now. I think it's as I've said before, I think it's a perfect storm. It's not just her talent or her appeal, which I think she is talented and appealing, but she's really fortunate to have teamed up with David O. Russell, who's done a lot for her career. He's planning on working with her, I believe, again on another some woman who invented like a cleaning product. He wants to make a movie with her about that. I think he realizes that she's just as beneficial to him. And she's the star of the biggest movie of domestically of 2013. It surpassed Iron Man. That's huge. And she is, obviously a female star. Now, I would say in both, I don't think it's quite like Robert Downey Jr., for instance, in Iron Man, and Johnny Depp in the Pirates of the Caribbean. And that's because I think that those franchises are driven by those people's personalities. Where I think that Jennifer Lawrence has more of a symbiotic relationship with her franchises. I think the franchise is just as big a part of its success as she is. I don't think she's the driving force. I think that she is contributing to it, and it's benefiting from being associated with those brands. The Hunger Games, I think, I think it potentially could have been as big with another actress. Potentially. Who knows who they would have picked if it hadn't been for Jennifer Lawrence. They were very smart to pick someone who was Oscar nominated for Winter's Bone, and then. Also I think the other cast members contribute a lot. I think Josh Hutcherson is a big deal there. I think that they do a great job with Elizabeth Banks has been wonderful. Woody Harrelson contributes quite a lot. And I think that Francis Lawrence has really done a commendable job behind the camera of really making that second movie, Catching Fire, a genuinely really, really good movie. So I don't think it's all as to Jennifer Lawrence's credit. As for the X-Men films, Mystique has always driven those films. Even when Rebecca Romijn was playing the role. And she was never a movie star, has never been a draw, but she was a draw as Mystique. Bryan Singer's reinterpretation of that character, I think, was the smartest thing that he did, in addition to casting Ian McKellen and Patrick Stewart. But his Mystique is really inspired. I'm torn on this because I miss Rebecca Romijn. I thought she did a phenomenal job in the role. And I think that some people pointed out that they're upset that in this new movie, Mystique spends a lot more time in her human form so that we can see more Jennifer Lawrence. Whereas Rebecca Romijn was actually kind of a big deal and a little bit like a shout out, like a wink when she took on her human form, which was very rarely. And that was a big part of how she felt. She was like, why should I hide who I am as a mutant? So I hope that they at least and I think Bryan Singer, because this is his creation, will address that, but why is she spending so much time in her Jennifer Lawrence, her human form instead of being Mystique? We'll see. We can see her action scenes are back. But I think that's why I think whoever was playing Mystique would be in front of Wolverine and Magneto to some degree. I think that those three people, Wolverine, Magneto, and Mystique, are the draw of that franchise. But yes, I do agree with you, as I said. I think this is a huge period for Jennifer Lawrence's career. I hope she can keep it going. It's a very fine line between being everyone's favorite star and a backlash that can happen sometimes. And I think she's very lucky she didn't beat Lupita Nyong'o for the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress this year. I think that people would have felt this has gone too far, but she lucked out. She didn't. She just got a nomination, which is great. It kept her credibility up as a top actress, and I think big things are in her future. I think Mockingjay is going to be huge, and she has 2 of those movies because they've split it up. So lots of great things on the horizon for Jennifer Lawrence. I'm not quite sold on her Mystique just yet. Let's see how she does when the movie comes out. I didn't like her in First Class at all. And that's because I'm still loyal to Rebecca Romijn. I thought she, again, fantastic in the role, and there's no reason she couldn't still play it. All right, so that's the second question of the day. All right, so the third question is 2 together. So I'm going to read them in a row. All right, so the first comes from Allison. And she says, "Hey, Grace, I have a question for you. In the Star Wars universe, the term canon, quote unquote, where a storyline and its characters are completely and credibly part of the Star Wars universe, is used a lot. Especially in talks about the extended universe in relation to the new Star Wars movies coming up. For instance, what's in canon, what's not canon. It's a very popular term in fandom and pop culture. It's used in comics, etc. But I was wondering if the term canon applies to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. More specifically, I was wondering if possibly, since Agent Coulson and his team never appeared nor were mentioned in Captain America the Winter Soldier, that the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is not credibly part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, aka that S.H.I.E.L.D., Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is non-canon. And that in the MCU, Coulson is still dead, which would be an excuse for why he didn't appear in Captain America 2 and or why he doesn't appear in other Marvel movies. I don't think that's the case. Let's see. Yes, the show is affected by Captain America 2, and Samuel L. Jackson, Colby Smulders, and Jamie Alexander did appear on the show. But since the MCU hasn't made any kind of references to the show at all, the show hasn't affected the MCU at all, and so the show isn't doing all that well anyway. I'm thinking that maybe in the MCU the show isn't canon, and it's more like fan fiction or something that doesn't connect with the MCU. Compare this to a comic book writer wanting to write a story about Gwen Stacy, even though she's officially been dead for 41 years. You know your stuff, Allison. I'm impressed. Okay, what are your thoughts? By the way, I love your show and your perspective of the movie industry. Keep it up. Thank you, Allison. All right, so that's the first question. In short, is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. canon? If not, why not? And does that hurt the show? What is the show if it's not canon? All right, now James Green says, "Hey Grace, longtime viewer and regular questioner. I really, really hope you can help me with this because I don't really know where else to go. How can I not help you with that request, James? I'm going to do it. Basically, I adore the Marvel Cinematic Universe and most superhero films now I come to think of it. Excellent. You almost ticked off a lot of DC fans there, James. I'm really interested in getting into comics at the moment, particularly Marvel ones. Oh no! Actually, I don't read hardly any DC comics anymore. It's really quite sad. My stack used to be 50-50, but not anymore. But I still spend a lot of money on comics, though. Marvel's putting out so many comics. But due to the ever-changing and constant storylines of them, I don't know where to start and what ones to buy. What do you recommend? Thanks, and I love morning movie news. My evenings wouldn't be the same without it. I live in London. 3 smiley faces. All right, thanks, James. All right, so James is basically saying comic books don't seem to tie into the Marvel Cinematic Universe either. How do I enjoy those? Because I think James is looking for to extend his Marvel Cinematic experience. So that's why I put these two together. Basically, we have a situation where Marvel has 3 threads going. They have the movies, this television show, and the comics, and they loosely are tied together. Basically, where you have the comic books and the television show referencing or being influenced by the movies, but the movies kind of having complete, autonomy and doing whatever they want. I mean, I think Marvel is more respectful of its source material than anyone else. Although I think Sony's getting close with Spider-Man, but they're the cart, they're the horse. Everything else is the cart. So let's talk about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. first. I believe that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. probably they would have liked it to reference the movies, but as Allison pointed out, it's not doing particularly well. So I think that this is kind of like a barrier they've put up to protect their Marvel Cinematic Universe. They're like, okay, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is kind of like a Valentine to our super fans who want to extend. So James, perhaps instead of the comics where you're really not going to be able to carry out your Marvel Cinematic Universe experience, you should check out Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I can't speak to the quality. I don't watch it. I really have no interest in the show. I've tried a couple times when they brought Victoria Hand on, and it was Saffron Burrows. I was like, I love Saffron Burrows. She's undervalued. And then I watched a clip, and I was like, I'm still not watching this show. But people are telling me it's getting better. And also it's being increasingly influenced by what happens in the movies. I don't want to give any spoilers away. I didn't mean to yesterday. I apologize about that. I felt just awful, so I'm really avoiding spoilers today. But anyway, I think the reason Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is non-canon when it comes to the movies is to protect them. As for Coulson, I think he's caught in the middle. I think the movies would never say he was still dead because they don't want to negate anything happening on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but they just want to kind of put up a firewall, I guess, is what I'm saying. Now, the reason the movies are driving everything is because they by far and away make the most money. If this Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show was a huge hit, I think you would see it more closely tied in. And if it continues not to do well, and they're bringing on Patton Oswalt, I think, to try and help the show, which is, I think, not a great sign, I think that you would see more of an interaction. And I also think as the show goes on, I think you're going to see less and less Marvel Cinematic movie stars willing to go on there because they're like, this is a sinking ship. It can't be saved. Don't endanger me going down with it. So yeah, I don't know how much longer Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. will last. It just isn't able to capture anyone's attention. I think largely because it's a network show. I have much higher hopes for what Marvel is doing over at Netflix. I think that could be quite exciting. So we'll see if that succeeds. That could end up being canon. You might see it start to get referenced in the movies, because they're going to be the Defenders, they're going to be in New York and Hell's Kitchen on a smaller scale. There's a very good chance not only will they reference it, but you never know, someone could be brought up to the big leagues if it's as big a hit as, say, Game of Thrones or even Mad Men. Either a ratings hit and or a cultural hit, like a big fandom. Game of Thrones has everything. All right, so that's what's going on with the show. That's why I think Marvel itself doesn't know what to do with it because it's not at all the success they had hoped. But they don't want to embarrassingly admit that. So it's kind of stuck, like as I said, this no man's land with a firewall up. And it's trying to draw off the movies for its own benefit, but the movies won't touch it. Then as for comic books make so little money in relation to the movies. It's not a joke because I think it's hurting the comics. I've said that many times, and I think that the comics are starting more and more treated as, at least I feel at DC, promotional material for the movies and the television shows. It's almost like those crappy little leaflets they'll hand out for free and be like, hey, you want, or you get as like a prize in a box, and the quality just isn't, like a cereal box or something, and the quality just isn't there. Although, by the way, I did buy some Honey Nut Cheerios the other day because it had a comic book in it. I haven't opened the box yet. I actually forgot about that. That just shows you how little interest I have in the DC, comics these days. I bought it and then I forgot about it. And I should go home and open that and see what the comic's like. So I'm glad I thought of it. So thank you for reminding me, guys. But I think that, Marvel's done a little bit of a better job. They're kind of doing a relaunch right now, a whole bunch of number ones the past few weeks. Some of them are quite good. For instance, I love the new Ghost Rider. I actually thought Silver Surfer was pretty good. Those are the ones I just read recently. So, James, my advice to you on this is that if you want to just continue your Marvel Cinematic Universe experience, that's not going to happen in the comics. I would even say the preludes that they make sometimes, like they put out preludes to get you ready for the movies, even those aren't that great. I would go to as I said, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But the comic book stories are really good, and I think that when they realize that they exist on their own and they just try and continue what they've always done, which is tell good stories, they're actually really fun reads. So I would just jump in, and this is always my advice for all people who want to get into comics. You're never going to catch up. It's just not going to happen. You need to just jump in. It's like a moving train. Just get on it, and you will find yourself catching up eventually. You can always go on Wikipedia. I'm trying to think about the ink back. I know people are going to be saying that. I try to fill you in when I can, but it's very easy to catch up and to find out what's going on. And so there are very good Marvel comics to enjoy. But as I said, if you want it to be part of your Marvel movie experience, it's just not going to be that because they're different. So the reason I also wanted to bring this up today is I'm curious to how you guys feel. Do you think these should all be interconnected? Should this be one universe? Should the movies reference Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? Do you think that the comic books should be directly tied more into these movies and an extension of that? Or do you like keeping it separate to protect it? Do you think that's a good idea, from a business point of view and also as a fan? I personally, I really don't like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I think that should not have been made, especially if I have been privy to what it was going to be. I think that I'm very hopeful for the Netflix thing, as I said. I think the movies are going great, obviously, and I like the comic books being separate. I don't like it when the comic books are influenced by the movies, because the people, let's face it, the suits making decisions for the movies just simply don't care about the quality of the comics because there's so little money in play. They are really just a source material, and they already have the property. They don't need any more Thor stories to tell more Thor movies. And so I think the comics really need to be defensive. And I hope that the people who are working at these companies are championing the stories. I think that DC is having less success than Marvel, but we'll see what happens. So write your thoughts down below. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Roz, your question will be answered tomorrow. And also please let me know what stories you guys would like to cover. I'm saying there are no headlines coming out, but maybe you think I've missed one. Be sure to write that down below, and you can check out some more episodes right now.